The silence was the first thing that hit me. Not an empty house silence, but a thick, heavy silence, the kind that sucks all the air out of a room. Leo was standing in the middle of our living room, the one we'd spent a month painting that stupid shade of eggshell blue, and he was holding my phone. My phone. But the way he held it, with his fingers pinching the edges like it was something toxic, it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a piece of evidence. His face was completely blank. That was worse than yelling. I've seen him angry, I've seen him sad, but I'd never seen this nothingness. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable, and tilted the screen in my direction. And there they were. Messages between me and Declan, my boss, not just work stuff. There were late-night texts, little inside jokes, a heart emoji I'd sent after he'd complimented my presentation. Reading them out of context, under the harsh glare of our track lighting, they looked bad. I'll admit that. They looked bad. My first thought wasn't guilt. It was a hot, sharp spike of indignation. He went through my phone. He violated my privacy. "What is this, Sierra?" he asked, and his voice was so quiet it was terrifying. The defensive walls went up so fast I could practically feel them click into place. "What is this?" I shot back, my voice rising. "This is you going through my private messages? Since when is that okay?" "Since I saw you smiling at your screen at 1 a.m. like a teenager with a crush," he said, his voice still unnervingly level. "Just answer the question, what is it?" I snatched the phone from his hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. "It's called friendship, Leo. It's called having someone to talk to. Something that's been in pretty short supply around here lately." The words just poured out, a torrent of resentment I hadn't even realized I was holding back. "When was the last time you actually asked me about my day and listened to the answer? You come home, grunt a hello, and disappear into your computer. I might as well be living with a ghost." I was on a roll now, the self-righteous anger feeling warm and justified. Declan listens. He cares about my career. He asks for my opinion. It's companionship, Leo, that's all. So don't you dare stand there and act like I'm some kind of monster. Why are you overreacting like this? Honestly, isn't this your fault too? You need to understand, he drove me to this. I know how that sounds, like a classic cheater's excuse, but it's the God's honest truth. This wasn't a sudden thing. It was a slow burn, a gradual erosion of everything we were. A death by 1,000 paper cuts, and he held the blade for most of them. For the past year, living with Leo felt like screaming into a void. It was the little things, the passive-aggressive jabs that are impossible to call out without sounding insane. Like the annual corporate awards dinner 3 months ago. It's the biggest night of the year for my firm. I'd bought a new dress, a gorgeous emerald green one that cost a fortune. I'd talked about it for weeks. He promised he'd be there, my supportive partner, smiling by my side. The day of the event, I'm getting my makeup done, and I text him to ask when he's leaving work. His reply, "Oh, was that tonight? Totally slipped my mind. I'm swamped here." Slipped his mind. As if I hadn't circled the date on our kitchen calendar in bright red marker. I ended up going alone, making excuses for him, feeling like a complete fool. When I got my promotion to senior analyst, a position I had bled for, I came home bursting with the news, a bottle of champagne in my hand. I found him on the couch, headset on, deep in some video game raid. I had to literally wave my hands in his face to get his attention. When I told him, he just took off his headset for a second, gave me a distracted, "That's great, babe," and then immediately turned back to the screen, yelling at someone named Shadow Killer 42. The champagne stayed in the fridge unopened. Our conversations became a wasteland of monosyllables. "How was your day?" I'd ask. "Fine," he'd reply, eyes glued to his phone. "Anything interesting happen?" "Nah." It was like talking to a brick wall, but a brick wall that occasionally remembered to take out the trash. I felt invisible. I'd dress up for our date nights, and he wouldn't even notice. I'd try to start a serious conversation about our future, and he'd find a sudden, urgent need to go check on the laundry. He was there physically, but he had checked out of our relationship months ago. I was lonely. Not just single on a Saturday night lonely, but profoundly, achingly lonely, right next to the person who was supposed to be my partner. And yes, I knew about his family. I knew his dad had an affair with his secretary, and it blew their family apart when Leo was a teenager. He told me about it once, years ago, how it destroyed his trust in people. But that was a decade ago. Are you supposed to carry that baggage around forever? I figured he was a grown man, that he dealt with it. I saw it as this old, dusty piece of his past, something you acknowledge but don't let define your entire life. It felt like ancient history, something that had absolutely nothing to do with us, with me. It was his problem to solve, not a permanent leash on my life. He couldn't expect me to walk on eggshells forever because of something his father did. That's not fair. Then there was Declan. Declan wasn't some sleazy predator, he was attentive. He's the head of our division, sharp, ambitious, and respected by everyone. He's the kind of man who wears a perfectly tailored suit and remembers the name of your pet. He noticed me, not just as another employee, but as Sierra. He saw the work I was putting in, the extra hours, the weekends I sacrificed. While Leo was retreating further into his shell, Declan was pulling me into the spotlight. It started professionally, of course. He'd ask for my input in major meetings, singling me out. "Sierra, what's your take on the quarterly projections?" My opinion mattered to him. Then came the working lunches. "Let's get out of this stuffy office," he'd say, taking us to a nice Italian place downtown. We'd talk about market trends, about our career goals. He told me he saw a future for me at the firm, a real one. It was intoxicating. It was everything I wasn't getting at home. The lines began to blur after work. A few of us from the team would go for drinks, and slowly the group would thin out until it was just me and him. We'd sit in a quiet corner of a dimly lit bar, nursing old fashions, and the conversation would shift. He'd ask about my life outside of work, and I'd find myself opening up. I complained about Leo, about the loneliness, the feeling of being taken for granted. Declan just listened, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. He didn't offer cheap advice, he just made me feel heard. "You're too bright to be ignored," he said once, his hand briefly covering mine on the table. It was a fleeting touch, but it sent a jolt through me. The texts began soon after. At first, they were about work, a link to an interesting article, a follow-up on a conversation. But they slowly morphed into something more personal. He'd text me late at night, asking if I was still awake. We'd talk for hours, about everything and nothing. He sent me funny memes, asked about my weekend plans, told me I looked nice on a Tuesday. It was a constant stream of low-stakes, high-reward validation. Every notification from him was a little dopamine hit, a reminder that someone out there was thinking of me. And I'm being completely honest here. Nothing physical ever happened. We never even kissed. In my mind, that was the line. As long as we didn't cross that physical boundary, it wasn't cheating. It was just a deep friendship, a necessary one. I was drowning in the silence of my own home, and Declan threw me a lifeline. I wasn't trying to replace Leo. I was just trying to survive the emotional drought he had created. I needed that connection, that feeling of being seen. It was a coping mechanism, born out of the pressure cooker of my job and the emotional vacuum of my relationship. It felt like a perfectly justifiable act of self-preservation, which brings us back to that night. My justifications, my carefully constructed narrative of victimhood, it all felt so solid in my head. But when I spat them out into the suffocating silence of our living room, they sounded thin and hollow, even to my own ears. Leo didn't argue back. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't do any of the things I was prepared for. He just stood there, absorbing my angry words, and the blankness on his face slowly gave way to a look of profound, bottomless disappointment. It was a look that stripped away all my anger and left me feeling naked and cold. He took a slow breath, the kind you take when you're trying to keep yourself from shattering into a million pieces. "Sierra," he said, and my name sounded foreign coming from his lips. "Of all the people in the world, your boss." He shook his head, not in anger, but in a kind of weary disbelief. "You, of all people, should know what that line means to me." That was it. That was the only reference he made to his past. He didn't need to say more. In that moment, I saw it. I saw the scared teenager watching his family implode, and I saw the man who had trusted me, of all people, with that wound. And I had just poured salt, no, acid, right into it. Before I could even formulate a response. A real one, not the defensive garbage I'd been spewing, he turned and walked toward our bedroom. There was no hesitation, no dramatic storming off, just a calm, deliberate stride that was more final than any slammed door. I heard a zipper, the click of a suitcase latch. A minute later, he emerged with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. A bag I'd never seen before. It was a go bag. He had been ready for this. The thought sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. He pulled out his own phone, his thumb moving methodically across the screen. He didn't look at me. "I'm blocking you, Sierra. On everything, don't call me. Don't text my family, we're done." He looked up at me one last time, and his eyes were the eyes of a stranger. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with for 5 years, was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, someone with walls so high I could never hope to climb them. Then he opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind him. The click of the lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my world ending. For the first hour, I was just numb. I stood in the exact spot he left me, staring at the door, half expecting him to walk back in and say it was all a sick joke. Then the panic set in, a frantic, clawing thing. This wasn't happening. He couldn't just leave. 5 years doesn't just end with a quiet click of a lock. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type his name. I tried to call. It went straight to a recorded message. "The number you have dialed has blocked your call." Blocked. Just like he said, I tried WhatsApp. A single gray tick. Blocked. Instagram. His profile was gone, a user not found error staring back at me. Facebook, the same. He had systematically, efficiently, and completely excised me from his digital life. It was a brutal, bloodless amputation. My anger flared up again, a desperate shield against the rising tide of fear. How dare he be so cold, so clinical? He was punishing me, trying to make me feel as small and insignificant as he possibly could. I needed an ally. I needed someone to tell me I was right, that he was being a heartless bastard. I scrolled through my contacts and landed on Ava. Our mutual friend, the one who'd been there since the beginning. She'd always been on my side. I called her, and when she answered, I let it all out in a torrent of sobs and accusations. I told her everything, the texts with Declan, Leo finding them, his insane overreaction, the go bag, the blocking. I painted myself as the lonely, neglected girlfriend and him as the cold, unforgiving tyrant. I waited for her to coo in sympathy, to join me in my righteous fury. But the other end of the line was just silent, for a long, long time, so long that I thought the call had dropped. "Ava," I finally whispered, my bravado evaporating. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. It wasn't the warm, bubbly Ava I knew. It was flat, heavy, and full of a disappointment that mirrored Leo's. "Sierra," she said slowly, "what in the actual hell were you thinking?" I started to protest, to restate my case, but she cut me off. "No, stop, just listen. You know about his parents. You know what his father did. He confided in you. And you turned around and did the one thing you knew he could never handle. And with your boss. Are you serious? This isn't just about some flirty text, Sierra. This is about trust. You took his deepest, darkest fear and you made it real. You're not just an unfaithful partner in his eyes. You're a walking, talking ghost of his father. What did you think was going to happen? Did you really think he would ever forgive you for that?" Her words hit me harder than a physical slap. They cut through all my self-serving bullshit and laid the ugly truth bare. It wasn't an overreaction. It was a foregone conclusion. I hadn't just stepped over a line. I had danced on his father's grave. And for the first time since he walked out that door, I felt the first, true, terrifying pang of genuine regret. The next few days were a blur of hollow emptiness. The apartment felt huge, cavernous. Every object screamed his absence. His coffee mug still in the dish drainer, the indentation of his head on the pillow next to mine, the sci-fi novel he was halfway through lying face down on the nightstand. I wandered through the rooms like a ghost, touching his things, trying to feel something, anything. In a fit of desperation, I turned on his old laptop. It was a relic he barely used anymore, but he'd never gotten around to getting rid of it. I don't know what I was looking for. A clue? An explanation? I just needed a connection to him. It booted up slowly, and his familiar desktop background, a picture of a misty mountain range from our trip 2 years ago, made my chest ache. I clicked through folders aimlessly. Work documents, old photos, downloaded movies. Then I saw it. A folder on the desktop, innocently named 5th Anniversary. My heart stopped. Our anniversary was 3 weeks away. With a trembling finger, I double-clicked. The contents of the folder laid me bare. It was a full-blown, meticulously planned surprise trip. There were flight confirmations to Florence, Italy. Tuscany. He'd booked 2 round-trip tickets. A PDF file contained a reservation for a charming little villa with a balcony overlooking the rolling hills, the exact kind of place I'd torn out of a travel magazine and pinned to our corkboard a year ago. Another document was a day-by-day itinerary. It was all there. A private cooking class, tickets to the Uffizi Gallery to see the Botticelli paintings I'd gushed about since college, a reservation at a Michelin-starred restaurant that he must have booked months in advance. He had even bookmarked local wineries, remembering I preferred Chianti Classico. Tucked away in a subfolder was a payment receipt for a beginner's Italian language course. He was learning Italian, for me, for us. He wasn't absent, he wasn't neglectful, he was quiet. He was planning. He was building this beautiful, incredible future for us in silence, while I was out chasing cheap validation from my boss because I was too self-absorbed to see what was right in front of me. The whole narrative I had constructed, the lonely girlfriend, the checked-out boyfriend, it was all a lie I had told myself to justify my own shitty behavior. He wasn't ignoring me. He was loving me in his own steady, quiet, thoughtful way. And I had taken that love, that beautiful, secret-filled plan, and I had incinerated it for a few heart emojis and a pat on the head from my boss. Fast forward a few weeks. I'm at a company mixer, one of those loud, soulless networking events. I'm wearing my most expensive dress, my makeup is flawless, and I have a glass of champagne permanently attached to my hand. I'm the life of the party, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that aren't funny, making eye contact with everyone, projecting an aura of fierce, untouchable independence. Declan is here, of course. He's been keeping a careful, professional distance since that night, offering polite smiles in the hallway but nothing more. The lifeline has been retracted. I see him across the room, surrounded by executives, and I feel nothing but a dull, bitter ache. A junior colleague, someone young and impressionable, comes up to me. "You seem so happy, Sierra. I heard you and your boyfriend broke up. You're handling it so well." I toss my hair back and give her my best, brightest smile. "Single and thriving," I announce, my voice ringing with a confidence I don't feel. "Honestly, it's for the best. I finally got rid of a boring man-child. Now I can focus on what's really important, my career." My little audience nods in approval, admiring my strength, my resilience. I am playing the part of the winner. Later that night, I get home. The click of the lock echoes in the crushing silence. I slip off my heels, the sequins on my dress scratching against my skin. The apartment is cold, sterile. I don't bother turning on the lights. I sink onto the couch in the darkness, the city lights painting sterile patterns on the wall. I pull out my phone. My fingers move on their own, a pathetic, well-worn ritual. I open a burner Instagram account I created, one with no name and no followers. I type in Leo's handle. His profile is still private. His smiling face and the tiny profile picture a cruel mockery. There's nothing new to see, but I refresh it anyway. Again, and again, and again, just in case. The screen's harsh light illuminates my face, and I can feel the hot, silent tears tracking through my expensive foundation, leaving clean, dark lines on my cheeks. I am the winner, I tell myself. I am thriving. And I sit there, alone in the dark, refreshing a blank page, waiting for a ghost.